Hello there, and a very good afternoon to you, and welcome once again to our question and answer session with Professor Michael Clarke. Professor Clarke, good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, Kamali.
Very busy today. I've already seen you
Busy day.
rushing around podcasts and on TV. It's a busy day for Michael, and of course that is because violence has flared once again in the Strait of Hormuz. There have been an exchange of fire between Iran and the United States. When I was preparing for this a couple of hours ago, there were reports that there were still incoming missiles. I think, is it still happening? Are we still...
As of about an hour ago, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so it's ongoing. So we will discuss when a ceasefire isn't a ceasefire, and I think we can safely say the ceasefire has been broken, and this is now the continuation of war.
I mean, the ceasefire is broken, but both sides don't want to go back to where they were in early April.
Right.
And so there is still a sense of restraint. Both sides want to go back to negotiations, but the Americans are very impatient. Mm-hmm. The Iranians want to just string out the negotiations because that allows them to get what they want out of this whole thing. Neither side wants to go back to an all-out conflict, but both of them are prepared to fight at a higher level. I think that's where we are now.
Yeah, one thing I'm finding interesting as well is that the Israelis don't seem yet to have become a part of this latest round of violence.
No.
Unless I've missed it.
It's a good point, Kamali. That is interesting. One thing that's happened in Israel, the date has been set for the Israeli election, 27th of October, which is the last possible day constitutionally that it could be held. Mm-hmm. And Netanyahu is in deep trouble. Gadi Eisenkot looks as if he might be the leader. I mean, it looks as if he might actually outdo Netanyahu, partly because, as I think we've said before, Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett have made an alliance. So it looks as if the anti-Likud forces would be united enough to get rid of Netanyahu. And Netanyahu must now know that he's deep into his election campaign now, and further fighting in Lebanon is not going to achieve very much. Mm-hmm. So I think there's the usual grumbling issues, along the Litani River and the Israeli security zone, but the idea of pushing the Americans and pushing Iran by all-out attacks on some areas of southern Lebanon, that's on the back burner for now. I suspect it'll come back, but for now it looks as if Netanyahu is more worried about the domestic take up of what's happening than the actual war itself.
Since we've meandered that way, Michael, I think it is interesting and important just to have a thought about who Gadi Eisenkot is, former IDF man, chief of staff for the IDF.
Chief of staff, yeah.
Does that, a soldier versus being a politician?
That plays, yeah. I mean, Netanyahu was in the military, but he was in elite. He was in the elite corps, but people said, oh, well, that was special. He got lots of privileges, and he moved into the elite without being, a real soldier. That's slightly unfair, I think. But Gadi Eisenkot was he was in everything. He came through the military. He was if you like, a working class boy. Mm-hmm. He lost his son in the war in Gaza. He doesn't talk too much about that, but everybody knows it. He's not a great performer, but he has authenticity. People believe him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the silken skills of Netanyahu. He may not have all the political skills, but he has a sort of a credibility. He's a soldier. He's lost his son. He speaks differently about Israel's attempt to, as it were, see out this crisis that began with the atrocity of 7th of October 2023.
And is he expansionist insofar as the West Bank becomes part of a greater Israel?
Not to my knowledge, anyway.
Gaza,
we don't know. He hasn't said enough about his political ambitions, but certainly, he's not one of the right wingers, and the danger for him is that he would end up having to come up with a coalition that would be more centrist and leftist, and even rely on some of the tiny Palestinian party, and that would not be popular with a lot of the electorate. So it's not that easy for him to come up with a coalition. It's not a done deal, but he's more popular than Netanyahu. And we'll see how Likud gets on, which is Netanyahu's coalition, which now, his coalition includes these ultra-right wingers, which has driven his policy for too long. Yeah. And I think there's a sort of sense in the Israeli public that they just can't live like this forever. They can't be fighting on 5 fronts at once with no apparent resolution to any of those
Having
5
lost
fronts.
in some ways your best ally, or at least rhetorically, hearing from Trump that he's not.
Yeah, I mean,
and there's some on the MAGA right as well who are very unhappy with the support.
Yes, I mean they've got their best and only friend in President Trump, but in the Republican Party in the United States is pretty annoyed by and large with Israel and the way it's conducted its policy, and it is difficult, of course. Who would want to be in that position after the atrocity of the 7th of October? But they've handled it in such a way as to leave themselves facing nothing but an open-ended war.
Something we definitely will come back to. And date for your diary, 27th of October for the Israeli election. Okay, hundreds of you sent your questions in. Appreciate it as always. Let's get straight into them then. Kevin P asks this. It feels like neither the US nor Iran can hit anything significant enough to push the other into negotiations. Are both sides holding back, or are both sides' strikes meaningless?
Yeah, no, I mean, both sides are holding back because this is not the worst that either of them could do. And both of them think that there will be some sort of further negotiation, but they're trying to position themselves in each case to give more strength in that negotiation. And at the moment, you have to say the Iranians have got more going for them than the Americans, because the Iranians can close the Strait of Hormuz and keep it closed, whatever the Americans do, more or less. And the Americans can keep striking Iran, and they can keep hurting Iran, but they're not going to hurt the willpower of this IRGC leadership, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, of the hardliners, the ultra-hardliners. And although they are divided amongst themselves, as I think we've spoken about before, I mean, the fact is, even the moderates are, I mean, Pezeshkian, Arachi, the foreign minister, Pezeshkian, the president, I mean, they don't have the same sort of influence. Galibaf now, Speaker of the Parliament, he actually looks like a relative pragmatist.
Right.
And Vahidi, who's the leader of the IRGC, is now an absolutist. And Vahidi looks as if he's got more influence than Galibaf. I mean, a couple of months ago, we were saying, well, Galibaf seems to be the man. He now looks more moderate. So the IRGC are not in the mood to make any concessions, and they do control the Strait of Hormuz. And the only way they could lose that control is if the United States was prepared to fight the Battle of the Strait of Hormuz. And I have this in my conceptual head, the Battle of the Strait of Hormuz, which might go down in the history books. If the Americans were prepared to sail into the Strait of Hormuz with their 2 carrier battle groups and their landing crafts and the USS Boxer and its Marine Expeditionary Unit, all that, they would win a Battle of the Strait of Hormuz. They would win it. But they would take some losses in doing so. And having won the battle, they've got to stay there.
Got to hold it.
They've got to hold it. They've got to stay there. They've got to keep something there, which is the open-ended, endless, forever wars that Donald Trump said he would never engage in, which is why they won't do it. But that's the point. In terms of sheer military power, you could conceive, I mean, I could, as a staff college exercise, I could tell you how the Americans would win the Battle of the Hormuz Strait using air power, the Marines, the destroyers, air defense destroyers in a gun line, and mine countermeasure vessels, and then escorting ships around the Omani coast. It could all be done, but it would be a big battle that the Americans would take some losses in, and then it wouldn't be a once and for all battle. Having won the battle, they'd have to keep on mowing the grass, as they say. They'd have to keep on going back and doing the same sort of thing regularly to open the Strait of Hormuz, which is why they won't do it. So they don't have a good military option for the future. Whereas the Iranians, for all that they've been so badly hit in their navy and their air force, they've got air power in missiles and cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and drones. They've got sea power in all of their robotic ships and their small craft. They have got military options, and they can play a different sort of game and they get to make the agenda. They set the agenda to which the Americans have to respond. And that's the way it's been now since early April.
Let's continue the staff college exercise then. So with this sort of tentative steps that the US are doing and not going full might, the Iranians have the advantage because they have, as you say, the means to keep things dangerous in there. Let's think about the idea of the Americans actually trying to fight the Battle of the Strait of Hormuz and having allies as a part of that. How much would that help? I mean, he hasn't been able to generate any allies for this, but could an argument be made if the Strait is closed and the global finances are hit, the economy is struck so badly in months to come that Britain, France, whomever else.
Some big international force.
Yes, but then because then it becomes some
Well,
more than what it was in February 28th.
That could be conceivable, but international forces of the sort we're talking about, I mean, European NATO forces, wouldn't add hugely to the big American presence that's there. They would add something, but what they might add would be more credible political
some
pressure.
legitimacy to it.
Because if a battle of the Strait of Hormuz were ever to take place, it could only be successful, politically successful, if it was accompanied by a big political process, which also found a way out, rather than just physically occupying the straits. Occupying the straits and then giving Iran an incentive to live with that and to think through another situation, to get on the other side of the problem and create a new political environment. That's what it would have to be. But I mean, even that's a bit far-fetched at the moment. I mean, who could make a difference in the Straits? India could. China could. If they were to put forces there and
the Saudis who
exert their power. Saudi might be part of the arrangement, as it were, because the Saudis are putting together a whole new coalition. I mean, they've moved away from the UAE, from the Emirates. They're putting together a whole new coalition, really, with Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar.
They're under Pakistan's nuclear umbrella, aren't they?
They are. That's what they
Very
say.
nice for them.
So there's a new balance of forces taking shape in the Middle East as we speak. So any new battle of the Strait of Hormuz would have to play to that new political environment to convince the Iranians that you are losing control over the straits, and you've got to move on to a new dialogue, and that would be America plus others. But America on its own can't do that. It doesn't have the political credibility to persuade the Iranians to do anything, because the Iranians don't trust anything the Americans do or say.
Let's click on to Paolo's question, which is kind of in exactly where we are, Michael, and sort of the tactics around this. Paolo says, tactically speaking, how can the US take guardianship of the waterway when the geography of the area would indicate Iran and the IRGC hold the tactical advantage?
That's exactly it. I always say, don't look at a map of the Strait of Hormuz or the Gulf. Look at a satellite photograph, because what you see on a satellite photograph is how rocky and broken the Iranian side is, and how smooth and deserty the other side is. So, Bahrain and Qatar and Saudi, UAE and Saudi Arabia, you're looking essentially there at clear land. You look on the Iranian side, and you're looking at mountains and hills and rocks and coves. It's a good place to launch attacks from. It's a very hard place to attack, even from the air. And so the natural geographical advantages are to the Iranians to squirrel away, as they have done, so much of their force structure and just bring it out when they need it. And they've been building up that force structure since the 7th of April or the 8th of April, when the ceasefire came about. They've been working pretty hard to increase their stock of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. And the American intelligence reckons they've got about 70% of the number they began with.
Intact, right.
Something like.
How much has the US intelligence improved over these months of war? It was argued, I guess, that they went into the war a little naively, perhaps, in their strategy and their tactics. How much has that developed? Because I'm just looking here at a video of Trump talking about how he's going to hit them again and hit them harder. I mean, they've been doing lots of that, haven't you? And it hasn't got you anywhere.
They're attacking Bandar Abbas fairly regularly, opposite Keshim Island. They've attacked Jask and Sirik. Sirik is a natural sort of target. Jask is interesting. It's further south. It's on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, and that's an oil terminal that handles a bit of oil for the Iranians, about 10%, I think. So they've attacked Jask. And then they've attacked as far northwest as Bushehr, which is the civilian nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
It's a nuclear site, but it's not a nuclear weapon site. It's where they used to have the research reactor that they got from the Russians originally. And it's now it's the only nuclear reactor in the grid, the electricity grid for Iran. And they haven't attacked the reactor, but they say, it's been reported, that they've attacked close to the reactor, which is bothering people a little bit. So American attacks can go all the way along that south shore, but can they stop the robotic boats coming out? Can they stop the small craft? Can they stop the submarines, which we know the Iranians have got? No, they can't. Nor can they stop the missile launchers and drone launchers, because they can be from the back of a truck that just sort of zips out of anywhere looking like a civilian truck, and it's off. The other thing that's interesting, I haven't had time to check this morning, I always have a look at the weather.
Oh, yeah.
The weather in the Gulf, because we're into the southwest monsoon season in India. And that has the effect of pulling humid air into the Gulf, and it makes it very misty. And usually from about July to September, the Gulf is subject to these very dense mists, which means it's very easy for the smugglers in their small boats to go backwards and forwards as they do, but also it makes it much harder for ships to get a visual identity on boats that are zipping around, some of which can be IRGC gunboats, for instance. And I just haven't had a chance to check this morning.
Well, I can tell you it's about 31 degrees, 31 to 37 degrees, just like London
Is it
at the
clear or
moment.
misty?
It is clear, high heat, clear conditions. Humidity is high as well. But we did talk about that a little while ago, didn't we, Michael? The mists on the Strait of Hormuz, because on a clear day, I guess you can see across, was it
You
30
can, you
miles
can
or
see all the
something?
way across, yeah. But as I say,
But it
this time
comes
of
in.
year, normally, depending on how the southwest monsoon develops between June and September, it puts, particularly July and August, it tends to shroud the Gulf in frequent mists. And I've spoken to British naval personnel who used to be there as junior officers, and they said it was a real problem because they were always trying to, they were sitting on their destroyer or their frigate, and they could see so many small boats on the radar that they weren't sure what they were. A lot of them were smugglers, some of them were innocent, some of them weren't. And until you can get a visual ID on them, you're not really sure what you're dealing with because they're all zipping around. And some of them look as if they're coming straight for you, and then they veer away and they go off to take their load of cigarettes up to the Omani coast or wherever it is. And I remember him telling me, he said it's really hard at this time of year to kind of get a sense of where the threats are coming from.
Yeah, let's move on to this question here from Mikey, because it's something that was just in my mind, and I was going to kind of jump in with my own question, but we'll let Mikey do it, and then I'll come off the back. So Mikey says, Iran often responds to US attacks by launching missiles and drones at US allies in the region, as we've seen. Do these allies have sufficient military power to attack Iran themselves, and in what circumstance might they feel obligated to do
allies?
that? The Gulf allies.
Oh, the Gulf
so
allies.
Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar.
They have some, and interestingly, there are reports of, there are reports of unreported attacks. Some of the wires, some of the agencies now, Reuters and AP and so on, are saying that there seem to be unreported attacks coming from some of the Gulf states against Iran. And I remember a question a while ago, somebody said to me, do you think the Gulf states would retaliate? And I said, well, no, I don't think so, because what can they add to what the Americans have already got? I might have been wrong about that, because it is possible now that some of the Gulf states, possibly Saudi Arabia and certainly the UAE, may be adding something of their own to the attacks, not because they can make a material difference, because the US has got so much hardware that it can apply, but maybe to make the political point to Tehran that you're making enemies of us. Do you really want to do that for the future? Yeah. So that's a possibility. But materially, can it make a difference to the balance of forces? Not really. But politically, maybe it's a bit of signalling that is going on. But at the moment, nobody's confirming that Gulf states have taken part in any of the attacks. They've certainly had a very active role in defense, in their own defense, their air defense, and so on. But are they launching attacks, say, at Bandar Abbas or somewhere like that? That's now possible in a way that about a month ago I didn't think it would be possible.
Interesting. I mean, not that it would have an impact on whether or not those the monarchies were toppled. You're not going to have an uprising if they're being hit and they're not responding. But I guess that they would. They can't allow the attacks on their countries to go unanswered.
Yeah, I think
what
they're probably doing is they're thinking, look, at some point this all ends. The Americans will leave. And we've got to live with Iran afterwards. And so what are the terms upon which we live with Iran? Now, the UAE have already thrown their lot in with the United States and with Israel very clearly. And that's why there's quite a big difference now, bigger than ever before, between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And so the UAE must be thinking to themselves, we're now committed to at least a medium-term enmity with Tehran, and we've got to make that into something that we can defend ourselves against and maybe have some deterrence against Iran. We've got to be able to threaten Iran. We've got to be able to show that we can hit back in a way that they would prefer us not to. So there may be a certain amount of deterrence building up in that. It's a development to watch for sure.
Yeah, and as we mentioned in your first answer, there's sort of slightly throttling of their responses, because one thing that hasn't been targeted yet, and I don't think it will be targeted, or it may do, Mike, you'll tell me, is the infrastructure of these nations. Now, if you remember, towards the end of the first round of fighting, salination plants, gas plants were being hit in the Gulf states.
The Ras Laffan in Qatar was really important, and that's going to be a couple of years before that comes back online. And that was a piece of infrastructure of critical importance to Qatar. And it was damaged, severely damaged. So that's really important. It hasn't happened since.
No. And would they ratchet up to there? Because you always talk about the sort of the levels
they
that
might.
they can go
Well,
to.
the answer is they might. I mean, they're holding that as the deterrent. They say, if you, the United States, if you really push us, then we'll go back to targeting infrastructure, and of course, the most vulnerable infrastructure is desalination plants. The whole of the Gulf, it isn't just drinking water. The whole of the Gulf relies on water, clear, clean water. There's only so much you can do with seawater.
Which is what's so interesting about the exchange of missiles, because there's this overarching fear of what you actually could do if you really wanted to, and everyone is aware of that risk.
That's how deterrence works. I mean, and both sides are trying to deter the other with the threats that they could make. So the Americans are trying to say, we could actually cripple the whole of Iranian society by bringing your energy to a halt, by bombing your bridges, which is what President Trump said on the 7th of April. And the Iranians are saying, we could attack the whole of the region and we'll go for your infrastructure and we'll damage you for years to come. Neither side wants to do that. But of the two threats, of those two deterrent threats, the Iranian one is more credible than the American one. And it's more doable as well.
With conflict continuing, Michael, though, do those targets then just become sort of inevitable? That you have to end up hitting those targets?
No. I mean, you can imagine a grumbling war of threat, of strike and counter-strike that goes on at about this level,
right?
To the end of the year, into next year or whatever. If the Americans don't withdraw, if they don't declare victory and leave. And we'll see, as we get closer to the November midterms, then this is going to be the key moment. And again, there's a lot of discussion. Again, as somebody said in the papers this week, the difference between President Trump and President Putin is that Putin doubles down regardless of the strategic mess that he's in.
Yep.
And Trump actually backs away and pretends he never said it. I mean, Trump will back down and just change the narrative and deny he ever said what he said. And he's barefaced enough to do that. And so there is a sense in which the nearer we get to the midterms, then the more President Trump will just think of something else to
another way of
think of another way of leaving. Yeah.
But
I go back to what we said on I think the second or third day of this war, on the 2nd or 3rd of March. At some point, the Americans will declare victory and leave.
Yeah, and the Iranians know that.
And the Iranians know that. Yeah, the rest of us know that. Yeah.
Question here from Kara G, which begins with some praise for you and for me, which is nice. Thank you so much for the breadth and depth of your insightful analysis in these turbulent times, Kamali and Professor Michael. Great. Your expertise and balanced views are greatly valued. Kara, we appreciate you.
Somebody else said that to me.
Really?
Actually, this week on a station, somebody came up to me and said he liked what we did. He said, "Oh, and that man with you."
Oh,
I said,
me?
"What do you mean? Come on." Yeah. He said, "He's very good, isn't he?"
Oh, excellent.
I said, "Oh, he is."
He's
very good.
Don't often hear how good I'm doing, so it's always nice to hear it. Thanks, Kara. We appreciate you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Kara's question. What are the chances that Iran's leader is actually alive? When you were naming all of them, I thought you didn't name Mujtaba. So where is he? What's going on?
Well, I've said this before, so I'll say it again. He's like Schrodinger's cat, right? This is all about quantum physics. Okay, so Schrodinger's cat is so you put a cat in a box, and you don't know if it's alive or dead. So until you look, until you find out, then it's both alive and it's dead. And as Terry Pratchett, the great science fiction writer, said, people say that Schrodinger's cat is either dead or alive. Well, maybe he's just bloody annoyed. That was his third point. That was his third state. And Mojtaba is like that. Until somebody proves that he's clinically dead, then he's politically alive. That's the way it is. He's both dead and alive. But he was expected to make an appearance at the funeral last week.
They had a whole week to get him out,
and when they took the sarcophagus, the coffin, to Mashhad, which is the burial place and his birthplace of the Ayatollah, you'd think then that he would have made an appearance. My own view, I suspect he's alive, because I think if he were dead, then the Iranians would want to get somebody else in place quickly in order to have a name and a face. But it may be, I'm guessing obviously, but it may be that he's so disabled by the attack that they think it would not be a good look if he did appear and was clearly very badly disabled or very disfigured or whatever it might be. And it may just be that, yes, he's compos mentis and he is part of the decision-making structure, but they feel it would be bad for morale if he was seen in whatever state he now is. Yeah. That's my guess. But it's pure guess. So do I think he's alive? Yeah, I think he's probably alive, because if he were dead, I think they would have replaced him by now.
Interesting. So from the Iranians' point of view, it's fine to have him both alive and dead because he's serving as that figurehead.
It can only go for so long. I mean, for the Iranians themselves, I mean, people were disappointed not to see him. I mean, a lot of the supporters of the IRGC, of the revolution, all 10 million of them, if that's how many there are, expected to see him and were disappointed that he didn't appear. So I think they can only go so long before they have to do something about it.
And in terms of the US and Israel, and I mean, do you think they know categorically whether or not he's alive or dead? I mean, I guess
I suspect they do,
and they would have probably said,
and the Israelis have said, we're going for him. I mean, when we get a chance, we'll kill him off, as they said about Galabaf as well. That's why it makes me smile when the United States is making quite a fuss about the fact that the Iranians have issued assassination orders, as it were, to try to kill President Trump, and that's inevitable. That's what they do, and there's a sort of sense of outrage in the United States. But the Iranians, from their point of view, are only doing what has been explicit U.S. and Israeli policy for some time, because they boast about the fact that they've killed Iranian leaders, they've assassinated them with air attacks, and if the Iranians could do the same, they can't do it by air attack, but if they could, they would. There is an equivalence here. And, a very good friend of mine, Mats Berdahl, really good Norwegian analyst, who's a good old colleague, he wrote something really interesting recently. He said, as world politics breaks down, as order breaks down in the world, one of the things that's really broken that order is our acceptance of assassination as a means of statecraft. And it goes back to 9/11. It goes back to the global war on terror of 9/11. We started then to say, in the cause of counterterrorism, we can assassinate people. And the world has accepted it, and it goes on all over the world now. The assassination of political opponents in foreign countries or in your own country, doesn't matter. And that sense that assassination is a legitimate tool of international politics is deeply, deeply subversive to global order. It's a good point that Mats makes.
Good point, well made.
Mats Berdahl.
I think I'll agree with Mats Berdahl's worth looking up some of.
Professor Mats Berdahl, King's College,
Find some of writing. We're going to move on to a question before we move on to our Ukraine section. A question here about what comes next, and I thought that would be a good time to talk about the oil price, which is up. Brent crude $86 a barrel. WTI is at $79 a barrel. So up again, but not up to the crazy levels that we kind of expected.
Still discounted. It's still priced this in on the assumption that the oil market has reckoned that this is the way it will go if it's only at this grumbling level of violence. But if it goes beyond that, back to sort of early April, then the market will go much, much higher, I guess.
So final question then from Devon. You kind of touched on it, but it's worth going through again, I think. What's the chance of the US launching a full military land assault now? Iran is showing no willingness to change. And will they otherwise just keep the Strait as a bargaining chip?
Yeah, well, not great is the possibility of some sort of land assault. What President Trump has talked about for years, actually. I mean, when he was talking about things in the 1990s and the early 2000s, before he had a political career in mind, was that given that 90% of all Iran's oil goes through Karg Island, that's where they load it, and all of Iran's oil goes out through the Gulf. I mean, they don't have a land pipeline anywhere else. They should have, but they don't. And so Karg Island is a pretty big choke point. And President Trump has talked a lot about, why doesn't the United States occupy Karg Island? And then it could choke that off completely. And Karg Island is it's about 5 miles by 3 miles. It's small. It's 22,000 people. It's an interesting place, apparently. I've never been there, but it is, as well as all the oil terminals, it is like a nature reserve, and it's got villages on and small towns and so on. So yes, the Americans could invade and occupy Karg Island, but back to the old idea, if they did, they'd have to fight for it. The Iranians would try and get it back. Undoubtedly they would. And so they'd be in a battle for Karg Island if they went for it. And that's the easiest thing for them to do in terms of ground operations. Anything else is more difficult than that, because Karg could be occupied. It's physically an island. It's not connected to the mainland by a causeway or anything like that. So, yes, they could take Karg Island and then have to fight for it.
Can anything be taken from the fact, sorry, this has just come to me, that this sort of low-level warfare tells you that there is an aversion to both sides to it getting really bloody? Or am I just being
I think
naive
that's right.
about it?
There is an aversion. I mean, neither side is lunatic. I mean, both sides are reckless. Both sides are overstating their advantages. Both sides are overreacting. But both sides know that an all-out conflict between them would be a big loss for both of them. and might be regime changing for both of them as well. In a sense, that we might see regime change in the United States.
Well, he's gone back to Congress, hasn't he? So where is he legally with that? The War Powers Act.
The War Powers Act. Well, he still chooses to ignore it because the ceasefire of the 8th of April. They say, well, we're not at war now. We're in a ceasefire, and until that ceasefire comes to a formal end, even though I've said it's ended, but until that ceasefire comes to a formal end, the clock is not ticking. So we still haven't done more than 60 days of conflict. Is the argument.
So he's staying in that
when
window.
It comes to it, Congress can pass war powers resolutions until Congress changes to a democratic Congress, which it probably will in November in the House and may in the Senate. We're not sure, but it may in the Senate. If they then pass war powers resolutions, then they would command constitutionally the president to stop, and then there would be an almighty constitutional crisis over whether the president did what Congress ordered him to do. But at the moment, Congress won't order him to do that. Not yet. Because any resolutions fall by the wayside because the Democrats don't have a majority.
Well, that may well be coming in October. Okay, let's move on to questions about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Thank you for submitting these. And we've had one come in on our YouTube live chat from Pony Gets, who asked, what are Michael's thoughts on the testing of unmanned amphibious landing? Testing of the unmanned amphibious landing by Ukraine last week, carried out on the Kherson spot. Yeah. So what do we think about that?
Very interesting. Well, I'm still trying to get more details about it, but it looks as if last week the Ukrainians conducted a robotic invasion,
which is awesome,
of part of the Kinburn Spit. This is part of Kherson in the south, and it's this spit of land that goes right out into the to the river delta, and the. They've been on the end of the Kinburn Spit, but they want to move further into it, and strategically it's quite important to help protect Kherson City and stop the Russians bombarding Kherson City from that area to drive their artillery back. And it's very difficult to do because there's a lot of water in that area because you're dealing with all the tributaries to the Dniester River. Did I say the Dniester River? I'm sorry, the
Dnipro.
Sorry, Dniester is in Moldova. The Kinburn Spit is strategically quite important, and it looks as if they conducted a completely robotic invasion with their robotic boats and their boats with machine guns on, and that they drove back local Russian forces without putting a single soldier of their own in place.
Now
this is a limited thing,
extraordinary.
But this is interesting, and this is a sign of things to come. Absolutely.
13th of July.
6th generation warfare.
Yep. Completely unmanned amphibious assault using UGVs, uncrewed ground vehicles that had machine guns on them to be able to push back the Russians.
And the thing about those vehicles, they look like machine tools. They look like a lawnmower with a machine gun on top because you don't need any protection.
There needs to be
if there's no crew, you don't need to protect it. And if you lose it, you lose it.
Well,
and so
they have self-destruct as well to make sure the Russians don't get the tank.
They absolutely can do. So they're easy to produce. They look extremely crude. A bunch of lawnmowers with machine guns on moving forward, but there's no easy defense against them.
It's extraordinary. So look, the next thing, these are obviously being piloted by people back at base. The next thing is that these things are AI.
Wait till these are then connected to AI. I mean, that is already the case in drones. It's possible now to program drones to find their target, certainly the terminal phase of the target by AI. And we look at, I think we've mentioned them before, the Hornet drone is this is a Ukrainian drone which they developed themselves. Well, it's an American system which the Ukrainians have been able to adapt, and the operator sends it off. And if the operator stays in touch with it all the way to the target, that's fine. But if the operator loses touch through jamming, which it usually does, then it switches to AI and it finds its own target.
Wow! Within a
box, yeah. So the operator will say, or the commander will say, in this box, it's a free fire zone. So 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers, hit anything you like, whatever that might be. And so if connection is lost, then the drone makes its own decisions, and that's already happening.
I'm fascinated by this, Michael, and I'm sure you've had lots of thoughts about this and had the conversation with the people that know. But of course, war is sort of the locomotive of history, and it's moved us on really quickly here.
Yeah.
I guess it was always going to be the case that autonomous weapons would be the future of warfare. Has it happened more quickly, or is this just the sort of the natural evolution of it all?
It was happening slowly and in certain areas. So you can see autonomy. They always said in naval systems, naval guns, if they're trying to address like 50 threats at once, that's too many for a human being to see on a screen and decide which to go first. So that the AI looks at what it sees and decides which ones are the most important, which ones might miss anyway, which ones you can allow to hit because they're the less threatening, whatever it might be. And so that's been the case in naval systems because the guns or the systems have to zip around. They turn really, really quickly. As somebody said, look, there's still a cogwheel in there somewhere. If these turrets are zipping around, throwing out material, in the base of that somewhere, there's a gearbox and a series of cogwheels turning the damn thing around. Nevertheless, that's been the way autonomy has been developing, and undoubtedly, the Ukraine war has advanced it by, let's guess, 5 years, 8 years, something like that.
Okay.
Because these things have got to be used, and they've got to be used quickly, and they're brought onto the battlefield. They're tested on the battlefield. They're not tested, for 2 years behind the lines. They're tested there and then on the battlefield.
The nature of the battle, has that had something to do with it? Because, of course, Armenia and Azerbaijan fought a short war using drones.
2020,
right? That was drone warfare, aerial drones. So, of course, we've seen the use of drone warfare in wars in Africa, in Sudan recently, and also previously as well. Is there something about the battlefield in Ukraine that's allowed for this development of certainly the ground vehicle?
It's a good point. No, it's a really good point. That we shouldn't assume that what we see in Ukraine you would see elsewhere in the world in that way, because Ukraine is a relatively flat country. It's not particularly mountainous. It's a lot of water in Ukraine, which creates other issues. So you can't just transfer that battlefield, say, to Central Europe or to Southern Europe or to many parts of Africa. Some parts, but not others. And so, we would not see a repetition exactly of what we see in Ukraine, but you see the trends of robotics and AI in lots of systems, air, sea, and ground, or air, maritime, and ground systems. And that's what's interesting. It's the way it's being adapted to sixth-generation warfare. And, we see it in all three services now. I mean, in our own Army, Navy, Air Force are developing robotics at a very lively pace. And conceptually, we're doing pretty well. Conceptually, we're just not building enough of anything.
More factories and people to build them.
Yeah, we just don't have the numbers. We're good at the ideas.
Again, pausing to think about the world's first amphibious landing with no people.
It's a big moment, Kamali.
It's huge, man.
It's a big moment, actually. A complete amphibious landing entirely by robots on the Kinburn Spit. What was the date they gave you?
13th of July.
13th.
They say. Yeah.
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
I think it happened before then.
It must have happened before then.
Maybe
the reporting.
It's been reported then. It happened a little while before that. I saw it.
It just made me think as well about, because obviously any invasion of Taiwan would be an amphibious landing, and then
it wouldn't be robotic. I mean, Taiwan is it's 100 miles of water, and so you would see a lot of sixth-generation warfare, but you certainly wouldn't see robotic ships going a whole 100 miles without some traditional vessels with them. I'm sure.
Well.
See
when they do it and see what it's like.
Do you know that? I mean, an amphibious operation, even a Chinese amphibious operation against Taiwan, would not be simple. It'd be harder than D-Day of 1944.
I've seen some amazing pictures of them putting boats back nose to bow to stern, whatever it is, and then that's sort of the bridge that they're using to get their vehicles on. It's just incredible.
It's a version of a pontoon bridge. But it wouldn't be simple. Wouldn't be simple.
Very mountainous Taiwan, isn't it, as well?
It is. I mean, although it's got a lot of good invasion beaches on the west, which is not very helpful for the Taiwanese. Got lots of good possibilities for invasion on the western beaches.
Slight diversion, but worth it, I think. Let's move on to a question here from Mr. T. Excellent. Why is Russia leaving so many ships unprotected in the Sea of Azov? Mr. T says it's great for Ukraine, and how much damage are they actually doing?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. The tankers in the Sea of Azov, and apparently about 20 have been hit, the Ukrainians are claiming, plus 3 or 4 other cargo vessels. They're essentially to supply Crimea. Because look at the Sea of Azov, takes you to the Kerch Strait. There's big oil facilities on the Kerch Strait, unloading facilities, and the Ukrainians have been attacking the Kerch refineries fairly relentlessly. And by attacking the tankers as well, then they're actually starving Crimea. And this idea, Fedorov had said, what, about 3 weeks ago now, I think, or 2.5 weeks ago, he said, we are on a 40-day mission to make Crimea into an island. And to be honest, in that respect, I think they're well on the way. They're succeeding. Right. There will be a kickback from this. the Russians, will find, or Putin will find a way of countering it, not by anything he can do in Crimea, but somewhere else, probably. But this is the biggest political crisis for Putin. The idea, not that he's losing ground in the Donbass, though he is losing some ground in the Donbass and gaining some as well, but losing ground, but that the idea that Crimea becomes unviable, both as a military base, which it is, a very big military base or series of bases, and as a place for Russians to live. And the tourist trade has collapsed altogether. I mean, big tourist trade in Crimea, Russian tourist trade, very important to its economy. And that's collapsed totally at the moment. So the idea that Crimea becomes an island that's surrounded by Ukrainian hostility is a big, big problem for Putin. And he will react. He hasn't said anything about it so far, but believe me, he will react.
So they're into day 19 of that 40-day campaign. It's going to end on the 4th of August. Yeah. So they've got a little while to go. And apparently 116 ships have been hit in the Sea of Azov as a part of all of this.
Over a longer period, I think,
No, I think during this operation, from what I can see here, during the operation, they've hit Operation.
Okay, let me check. I don't deny it. Let me just check it out. See what they define as ships, boats, and tankers. I would imagine.
Never trust Google. Always trust Professor Clarke. But it says 116. Anyway, the point is that they are having a serious impact, and obviously they are.
No, it's working.
Looking to make Crimea that island. Okay, on to the next question here from Rob. With the fuel shortages starting to take place in Russia, how will this impact the notorious Russian winter?
Well, it's not a fuel shortage in the broadest sense. It's a petrol shortage.
Right.
What the Ukrainians have been doing is going for the refineries, so that now Russia has had to stop all diesel exports, and they've got restrictions on the supply of petrol to civilian use in more than 3/4 of their regions now. I think isn't it 82 regions or 86
I can find out for you. Carry on.
And they've got restrictions on over 70 of them now. I mean, the figures keep varying as to how many regions have got restrictions on. Some have got, in Crimea, they've got a state of emergency. And other places, they've just got some mild forms of rationing. But it's affecting most of the regions of Russia. And most critically, it's affecting Petersburg and Moscow. What have you got?
It's coming up.
Oh, right. Okay.
Google's not as quick as
you.
No,
you sat there. No. Because
it was about to come up. I was literally just thinking.
Okay.
So 78 of 83 regions have now
78 of 82
disruptions.
Okay. So the latest figure I'd seen, I think, was 70-something. Anyway, 70-something of 82. But the shortage is petrol. So it's not fuel oil. It's not heating oil, although it might sort of become that in one way or another. So I wouldn't expect the Russians to be shivering this winter because of this. But it is affecting petrol. It's therefore affecting transport costs. It's affecting food distribution. And it's affecting, in some respects, the ability to gather in the harvest. In certain regions, simply because of the need for petrol. So it will have a cumulative effect, but it won't, we're not going to see a sort of an 1812 winter moment or a 1941 winter in Russia.
No, and may not have that huge impact. Just a quick note on something I think everyone should try and have a read of. The Economist from last week, I believe, who speaks to a Russian oligarch who kind of lays out this vision of the future. I don't know if you've read the article with Melenchuk.
That's right.
It's fantastically interesting.
That there is an alternative beginning to form.
And
because, I mean, again, a bit like President Trump with Iran and Netanyahu with Lebanon, people around the leader can't see where this takes them. It's just another blind alley, another version of the blind alley, and you can talk it up all you like. Nobody can see. If people can't see a way out, they begin to think of alternatives, and that's what's maybe beginning to happen now. Maybe.
The article's all about Andrei Melenchenko, who's a very interesting figure, oligarch, very rich, one of the richest men in Russia, who has now put his head above the parapet and essentially said that there is another way through.
Yes.
Not criticising Putin really, but
very
just
dangerous to do that.
Very dangerous to do that. The article. It's brilliantly written. It's in The Economist. It's a really good read to sort of see, as you say, a potential alternative once Putin is no longer in power. Let's move on to the next question, and then we'll do some other business. So what's the likelihood, John asks, of the Russians opening another front or staging a false flag attack on a NATO state this year?
That's what I was thinking of when I said that Putin will respond to Crimea. And not only Crimea, but what's happening in general, that his war is grinding to a halt. there is a sense in the Baltic states, in Poland, in the Scandinavian states, that tension is building up, maybe towards a crisis in late summer or the autumn. And the view is that Putin will try to manipulate some aspect of a crisis or create a crisis, create new facts on the ground, maybe with Russian troops or Russian Spetsnaz special forces, whether they're wearing uniforms or not, as we're moving over into some part of NATO territory, like the city of Narva. Everybody looks at Narva, which is right on the border and has got a significant Russian-speaking population. And then the idea would be that in theory would be an Article 5 issue, that NATO should invoke Article 5 and say, we will fight you to get you out. But the theory is, look, the Americans won't fight, and they will lean on Estonia or they'll lean on Poland and say, look, make a concession. Just get out of this by making a concession. And the concession will be something to do with withdrawing support from Ukraine.
Yep.
That's one version. Another version of the possibility is that some sort of false flag attack is made, or false flag attack is staged, in order to justify to the Russian people why it is necessary for them to fight the Europeans as a whole, to explain why petrol is going short and so on. And last week, 10 separate countries began emergency evacuation procedures. They didn't start evacuations, but they put in place procedures. And those 10 countries, very easy to remember, are the 3 Scandinavian states, Norway, Sweden, Finland, the 3 Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Germany, Poland, Denmark, and Iceland.
Wow.
Iceland. Now, that's a separate story in Iceland's case, which we'll go into if you like. But if there were a major Russian offensive in Europe, Iceland is a very obvious target. And if you want to understand why, read John Grisham's book called Red Storm Rising, written in the 1990s about a Warsaw Pact NATO war. What would it look like? And Iceland becomes a really critical part of it because of the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, the GIUK, which is the route into the North Atlantic. Anyway, Iceland, separate issue. Right. But 10 states all began planning for major evacuations to get their citizens away from border areas. And that meant identifying routes, identifying places en route where there'd be food and water, shelter, and where people would go in large numbers if they had to be evacuated quickly from the border areas. 10 states started to do that. Why? Because Putin, amongst other things, he's been saying in public, he said, we're having an audit of how all these Europeans are helping Ukraine. We're going to work it out. We're going to look at what they're doing to help Ukraine because there will be consequences. He has said, completely without truth, that Ukrainian drones are being launched from the Baltic states against Russia. Not true at all. I mean, the Baltics would never allow that because of the danger that would imply. But he said it. I mean, that's what the Russians are saying, that the Baltics are being used as a base for targeting Russia. So there's this sense the Russians are building up tension in northwestern Europe. And those states of northwestern Europe are taking it pretty seriously. I think, I mean, it may all, as it would, drain away again, but if these trends continue, then we're heading for some sort of event or crisis or false flag attack of something sometime in the next couple of months. I mean, certainly the rest of this year is going to be more dangerous than the start of the year. And we've got to accept that. And the fact that governments are talking about it to their own publics, ours isn't talking about it to our public, but European governments are talking about it to their own publics, indicates that the best way to avoid it is to make sure everybody understands, to show the Russians that we know what they're doing, and that we are thinking about preparations.
I suppose there were planned strategies in place during the Cold War for that sort of thing to happen. The fact that they're re-upping them, the fact that they're modernising them, tells us that we are in a very different place to where we were.
And journalists are now writing articles about all of the tunnels in Finland. And all these great underground facilities with sports facilities underground. They're not underground for the sake of sports. They're there because they are shelters. It turns out that the Finns can shelter underground 85% of their whole population. 85%.
In Helsinki, you can see,
and they've got places for everybody. I mean, they've taken this very seriously since 1945.
Definitely have. All right, we're out of time for questions, and there's someone else who's going to come into the studio, so we have to wrap up.
Gotta go.
But there's something we wanted to address from last week,
is.
wasn't there, Michael? Because you and I were talking about the bombing campaign in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and how the Ukrainians was responding by hitting specific targets, trying to stop the Russian war machine, whereas the Russians were responding with area bombing. And it got us to thinking about where
Strategic bombing, yeah.
strategic bombing, and where it's been used in the Second World War. Bomber Harris, and then we got onto the US, and we started talking about Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And take it away.
Yeah. Shall I do it? Now, I said, incorrectly, I said that Hiroshima was a secondary target, that it wasn't the main target, and that because the first target was obscured, they went to Hiroshima. As I said it, I thought, gosh, I think that was right, but it wasn't. It was Nagasaki. Mm-hmm. The second target, Hiroshima was hit on the 6th of August and Nagasaki on the 9th of August, and it was Nagasaki that wasn't intended as the primary target. No. And you looked up what the primary target was.
Kokoru was
Kokoru,
the name of the city that they wanted to, but it was obscured by cloud cover.
So the bomber went to Nagasaki. So, yeah, I was factually wrong when I said it was Hiroshima. It was Nagasaki. Well, and our principle is not wrong for long.
Absolutely.
And I always, if we make a mistake, we try to correct it.
We do try and correct it. And as soon as we finished recording, we stood over there and we're like, we need to get that right. So thank you very much for getting in touch. Specifically, you, Mark Vibert, who wrote me a very nice message on LinkedIn talking about it. I've responded to you, Mark. So when you see this, check your LinkedIn messengers. And since Michael's apologising for getting something wrong, I should do one as well. A couple of weeks ago, I said that Wembley Stadium seats 80,000. Of course, it's 90,000, as we all know. So now we're all correct.
Yes, not wrong for long.
Never wrong for long. All right. I think schedule should align for us to do one of these again next week. We came a day early this week, didn't we? So we'll let you know as soon as we can when we're doing it next week. But I think, all being well,
yes, next week.
Be together at some time next week. So thanks very much for being with us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.